Could an old, useless draft horse really save a crumbling legacy? And what hidden abilities was he waiting to reveal? Prepare to be amazed. The 20th floor conference room was a cage of monotone lighting and corporate jargon that had slowly suffocated Evelyn Stone for 3 agonizing years. Q3 projections, market analytics, value add, it all blurred into a single crushing weight. When her supervisor asked for her thoughts on the merger timeline, the breaking point hit. The familiar tightness in her chest spread to her throat. The room tilted, and in a moment of pure, panicked freedom, Evelyn declared, "I quit," effective immediately. She stood on shaking legs, gathered her laptop, and walked out, leaving behind her 6-figure life in Chicago, driving for 2 days straight to escape the panic attacks, the prescription bottles, and the nagging therapist. She was running, but toward what? Only the remote Colorado mountains and the dilapidated Skyview Ranch, the last place she remembered feeling truly herself. But what she found there was devastation. The property, 800 acres of breathtaking high country, was dying. The barns sagged, fences were rust, and the main house looked ready to crumble. Only one dim light glowed in the kitchen window as dusk settled, reflecting Evelyn's own despair. She sat in her car, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then the kitchen door opened. Her Uncle Carl, 73, and looking every day of it, appeared on the porch. "Well," he called out, his gruff voice cutting through the quiet, "you going to sit in that car all night, or are you coming inside?" Inside, the kitchen smelled of coffee and wood smoke. Carl poured her a mug. "Heard you quit your fancy job," he stated, no preamble. "Your brother Sam called, said you had some kind of breakdown, said I should watch out for you showing up here." Evelyn automatically denied it, then conceded, "Maybe it was. I don't know anymore." Carl, with eyes that had seen too much hardship, studied her. "What are you running from, girl?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know," Evelyn admitted, clinging to the warm mug. "I just knew I couldn't stay there, and this was the only place I could think of that ever felt like home." Carl's face hardened. "This place is falling apart. I can barely keep the lights on. Not much of a home anymore." "Then why are you still here?" Evelyn challenged. Carl's jaw worked, his weathered face creasing with emotion. "Because your grandmother made me promise, made me swear I'd hold on until someone came back who gave a damn. I didn't think anyone would." They sat in silence, 2 souls clinging to a legacy neither knew how to save. Then Carl broke the silence. "I bought a horse." "What?" 3 days ago, saw an ad online for a Percheron gelding. Owner died. Family needed to rehome him fast. They were practically giving him away." Carl shook his head, a mix of regret and desperation. "Don't know what I was thinking. Can't afford to feed another mouth. Can't even work him. My back's too far gone. But something about that ad." "Where is he?" Evelyn asked, a spark of curiosity piercing her despair. "Back pasture. Been standing out there for 3 days, hardly moving. I think he's depressed or something. Horses get depressed, right?" They walked out into the purple dusk. As they approached the back pasture, Evelyn saw him, a massive gray Percheron named Blackwood, standing motionless. He was enormous, 18 hands, 2,400 lbs, with the heavy build of a classic draft horse, his dappled coat silvering in the rising moonlight. But it was his stillness, his profound sadness that struck her. He stood like a statue, staring into the dark tree line. "How old is he?" Evelyn whispered. 17. According to his papers, he's got champion bloodlines, spent his whole life as a logging horse up in Montana. Then his owner had a heart attack. The family sold off the operation." Carl's voice dropped. "Been standing in a pasture for 3 years after that. Nobody wanted an old working horse with no work to do." Evelyn climbed the fence. She'd been around horses as a child, but never a draft horse this close. Blackwood's shoulder was level with her head. "Hey, boy," she said softly, hand outstretched. The big Percheron's head turned, his dark, intelligent eyes focusing on her, and in them she saw it, the same emptiness she saw in her own mirror, a creature built for purpose, now standing alone, deemed too old, too useless, waiting for death. "Oh," Evelyn whispered, a wave of understanding washing over her. "You're just like me." Blackwood took a step, then another, moving with surprising grace. He lowered his enormous head until his nose was inches from her face, his warm breath on her skin. For a long moment, woman and horse studied each other, two beings discarded by a world that no longer valued what they had to offer, yet still capable, still waiting. Evelyn placed her palm on Blackwood's neck. His coat was warm, his muscle firm. He wasn't broken. He was just waiting. "Uncle Carl," Evelyn called back towards the fence, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "What do you know about draft horse logging?" "Everything," Carl replied, puzzled. "Spent 40 years doing it before the market dried up." "Why?" Evelyn turned, her hand still on Blackwood's neck, a newfound certainty blooming within her. "Because I think we just found a way to save this ranch, and I think this horse and I are going to save each other in the process." As the Colorado stars emerged, Evelyn made a silent promise to Blackwood. They would prove everyone wrong, the corporate world, her doubting family, and anyone who believed age or past trauma meant you couldn't start again. Skyview Ranch wasn't dead. It was just waiting for the right team. And sometimes the right team was a burnt-out corporate refugee and a supposedly washed-up Percheron, who both still had something to prove. The first week nearly broke Evelyn. Blackwood was magnificently trained, but she was not. Carl, despite his bad back, patiently taught her the basics: how to approach, harness, read body language. Theory clashed with practice as she fumbled with equipment, her shoulders aching, hands blistering, and twice receiving gentle nudges from Blackwood when she moved incorrectly. But she was learning. More importantly, Blackwood was changing. The depression was lifting. His ears were alert, his eyes brighter. He nickered softly when she arrived, a greeting that tightened her chest with emotion. He was waiting, Carl observed one evening, watching Blackwood roll in the dust, waiting for someone to need him again. Evelyn softly replied, "I know the feeling." The breakthrough came on the 5th day. Carl set up a training course, teaching Evelyn the voice commands and rain signals Blackwood knew so well. "Okay, boy," Evelyn said, her voice now confident. "Let's show Uncle Carl what we can do. Walk on." Blackwood leaned into his collar, and the modest pine log began to move, steadily, rhythmically, as if he'd never stopped working. "Gee," Evelyn called, and Blackwood turned right with precision. "Ha!" And he turned left, the log following effortlessly. At the end marker, Evelyn's hands trembled with adrenaline and pride. Blackwood stood calmly, awaiting her next command. "Whoa," she whispered. "Good boy. Such a good boy." From the fence, Carl grinned, the first genuine smile since her arrival. "I'll be damned. That old horse has still got it." Evelyn, stroking Blackwood's muscled neck, replied, "He was never the problem. Everyone just assumed he was finished because of his age." Carl raised an eyebrow. "You saying I'm not finished either?" "I'm saying we've all got more left in us than people think." That evening, Evelyn's laptop hummed as she researched sustainable forestry and draft horse timber operations. A pulse-quickening possibility emerged. The next morning, she made a call that would determine everything. "Crawford Sustainable Forestry. How can I help you?" "My name is Evelyn Stone. I'd like to speak with Mitch Crawford about contract logging services." After 2 transfers, a deep baritone voice answered, "This is Crawford." "Mr. Crawford, I run a draft horse logging operation in Colorado, and I understand you contract out selective logging work." A pause. "Miss Stone, I've heard of Skyview Ranch. Your great-grandfather built a good reputation, but that was a long time ago." "We're rebuilding," Evelyn stated, forcing confidence. "I have a trained Percheron gelding and a master horseman. We can handle contracts your heavy equipment can't reach." "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I don't take chances on unproven operations. Come spring, maybe we can talk about a trial run." "Spring is 6 months away. We need work now." Crawford sighed. "Look, I've got a job none of my equipment operators want to touch. Steep hillside, sensitive watershed, environmental regulations up the wazoo. It's barely profitable, but it needs to be done in the next 60 days before the permits expire. We'll take it." "You haven't heard the details?" "Doesn't matter. We'll take it." Another sigh, this one almost amused. "You're either very confident or very desperate, Mrs. Stone." "Both," Evelyn admitted. "Does that matter?" "Not if you can deliver. I'll email you the contract details, but I'm warning you. If you damage that watershed or miss the deadline, you'll never work in this industry again." After hanging up, Evelyn found Carl in the barn, oiling an old harness. "We got a contract," she announced. Carl looked up sharply. "What kind of contract?" When she explained hill logging in November with environmental restrictions, Carl's expression turned grim. "Evelyn, that's a suicide mission. Hillside logging with one horse and a rookie teamster? That isn't just difficult, it's dangerous." "Can we do it?" Carl studied her face in the lantern light, then looked at Blackwood, calmly eating hay. "Maybe," he admitted. "That horse is sure-footed, and he's got the experience, but you're going to need to learn faster than you've ever learned anything in your life, and we're going to need help." "What kind of help?" "The kind that comes with another draft horse and someone who knows what they're doing with them." Mara Elliott arrived at Skyview Ranch 3 days later in a diesel pickup truck, pulling a trailer that had seen better decades. At 35, she was a weathered contradiction. Delicate features, made tough by years of outdoor work, calloused hands that moved with surprising gentleness, and eyes that assessed everything with the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to trust actions over words. Behind her trailer stood a massive chestnut Percheron mare named Bronze, who looked even larger than Blackwood, if that was possible. "Otis called me," Mara said by way of introduction, not bothering with pleasantries. "Said you two were about to get yourselves killed on the Crawford contract. Said you needed a professional." "I didn't realize Otis was making hiring decisions," Evelyn replied, bristling slightly. "He's not. I'm here to assess whether you're worth working with or whether I should tell Crawford to give the contract to someone competent." For a tense moment, the two women sized each other up. Then Mara's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to be harsh, but draft horse logging isn't a hobby, and it's not something you figure out on the fly. People die. Horses die. If you're serious about this, you need someone who's done it before. I've been logging with drafts for 15 years. Evelyn swallowed her pride. "What would you need to partner with us on this?" 40% of the contract payment, use of your land and equipment, and final say on safety decisions. Also, I train you properly. No shortcuts, no ego. You do things the right way, or you don't do them at all. Deal." Mara's eyebrows rose. "Just like that? Just like that. This ranch is more important than my ego." For the first time, Mara smiled. "Then maybe we've got a chance. Let's see what you and Blackwood can actually do." The assessment that followed was humbling. Mara put Evelyn and Blackwood through exercises that revealed every gap in her training, every hesitation, every moment of uncertain communication between horse and handler. "Your commands are too tentative," Mara called out as Evelyn attempted to back Blackwood while attached to a heavy drag. "He needs to hear confidence, even if you're faking it." They worked until sunset, and by the time Mara called a halt, Evelyn was exhausted, frustrated, and oddly exhilarated. "You've got good instincts," Mara said, helping her unharness Blackwood. "And this horse is exceptional. With proper training, you might actually pull this off." "Might?" Evelyn asked. "Probably," Mara amended. "But we've got 3 weeks to get you ready for terrain that's going to test everything you've got. Starting tomorrow, we train 12 hours a day. Think you can handle that?" Evelyn looked over at Blackwood, who was rolling contentedly in the dust of the paddock, his massive body wiggling with pure joy. Despite his age, despite being written off, he was ready to work, ready to prove everyone wrong. "We can handle it," Evelyn said firmly. The next 3 weeks were a blur of early mornings and late nights, of aching muscles and small victories. Mara was a demanding but excellent teacher, and Otis provided decades of wisdom about reading terrain and weather. But the real revelation was Blackwood himself. The old Percheron seemed to come alive with purpose, day by day, as they practiced log dragging, hillside maneuvering, and precision placement. His movements became sharper, his eyes brighter. He wasn't just working, he was thriving. "Watch him here," Mara said one afternoon as they practiced on a steep slope Otis had created. "See how he's choosing his footing? That's 15 years of experience. You can't teach that. It has to be earned." Bronze and Blackwood worked together with surprising synergy, the mare's strength complementing the gelding's precision. When they were paired together for heavier logs, they moved like dancers, adjusting to each other's rhythm without prompting. "They're magnificent," Evelyn breathed, watching them work. "They are," Mara agreed, "but they're only as good as their teamsters. That's us. We can't make mistakes that put them at risk." One evening, as Evelyn was brushing Blackwood down after a particularly grueling training session, her phone rang. Her brother Sam's name appeared on the screen. She almost didn't answer. "Evelyn, what the hell are you doing?" Sam's voice was sharp with worry. "I've been calling for weeks." "I'm sorry. I've been busy." "Busy? You quit your job, disappeared, and now Otis tells me you're trying to start some kind of logging business. Have you completely lost it?" "I'm trying to save the ranch, Sam." "The ranch is a money pit. It's been dying for 20 years. Dad knew it. Grandma knew it. The only person who doesn't seem to know it is you." "This isn't true, Evelyn. You had a breakdown. You need rest, therapy, maybe medication. You don't need to be playing lumberjack with a horse that's older than most people's cars." The word stung because part of her wondered if he was right. Was she running towards something real, or just running away from her failures in a different direction? "Sam, I have to try. I have to know if I can do something that matters." "Your corporate job mattered. To who? To shareholders? To quarterly reports?" Evelyn's voice broke. "I spent 3 years feeling like I was suffocating, and nobody noticed. Nobody cared. But out here, working with Blackwood, I feel like I can breathe again." There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Sam spoke, his voice gentler. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want to lose you." "You won't," Evelyn promised, though she wasn't entirely sure she could keep that promise. As the start date for the Crawford contract approached, Mitch Crawford himself drove up to Skyview Ranch for a pre-job inspection. He stepped out of his truck, dressed in practical work clothes, his salt and pepper hair hidden under a forestry company cap. "Ms. Stone," he said, shaking Evelyn's hand firmly. "Mara, I'll admit, I'm surprised to see you involved in this." "Someone needed to keep them alive," Mara replied with a slight smile. Crawford walked around Blackwood and Bronze, examining their condition, their equipment, the setup that Otis and Evelyn had prepared. His expression remained professionally neutral until he watched them run through a practice demonstration. When Blackwood and Bronze moved a massive log up a practice incline in perfect tandem, Crawford's eyebrows rose. "I'll be honest," he said after they finished. "When you called, I thought you were delusional. But that," he gestured to the horses, "that's real craftsmanship, old school quality." "Will it be enough for your contract?" Evelyn asked. "If you can replicate that on a real hillside in real conditions, yes. But I meant what I said about the deadline and the regulations. One screw up and it's over." "Understood." After Crawford left, Otis pulled Evelyn aside. "You know what you've done, right? You've bet everything on this. If it doesn't work, We lose the ranch, your savings, your reputation. I know. And you're still going through with it? Evelyn looked over at Blackwood, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes, and felt a certainty she hadn't experienced in years. Uncle Otis, for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. Win or lose, this is right. Otis's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. Your grandmother would have loved to see this. The morning they began the Crawford contract dawned cold and clear, frost sparkling on the pine needles as Evelyn and Mara loaded the horses into trailers. The job site was 40 miles into the mountains, accessible only by logging roads that hadn't been maintained in years. When they arrived, Evelyn understood why no one wanted the job. The hillside was steep, perhaps 35 dollars or cirques, covered in old-growth pine that needed selective thinning without disturbing the delicate watershed below. Equipment ruts would cause erosion. Chainsaws would need to be used sparingly near the water, and every log would need to be moved carefully to avoid damaging the remaining trees. It was a job made for draft horses. All right, Mara said, standing at the top of the hill with their equipment spread around them. This is where we find out if we're professionals or pretenders. Evelyn, you and Blackwood take the upper section. I'll work the lower with Bronze. We take it slow, we take it safe, and we don't push the horses past their limits. Agreed. For the next 12 days, they worked from dawn until dark. The November weather held cold but dry, and the horses proved their worth every single day. Blackwood navigated the steep terrain with the confidence of a mountain goat, placing each enormous hoof with precision, leaning into his collar to move logs that seemed impossibly heavy. But it wasn't just the physical work that amazed Evelyn. It was the intelligence. Blackwood seemed to understand the job at a level beyond simple training. He would pause before difficult pulls, assessing the log, the angle, the terrain. He would communicate with soft sounds when something didn't feel right, and every time Evelyn listened to those warnings, she discovered he was correct. A hidden rock, an unstable log, a patch of loose soil. He's been here before, Otis observed on day 7 when he came up to check their progress. Not this hillside, but places like it. He knows this work in his bones. By day 10, they were ahead of schedule. By day 12, they were finishing the last section when the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled over the mountain, and the temperature dropped 20 cirques in an hour. We need to get out, Mara said, eyeing the sky. That's snow coming, and these roads will be impassable. We've got 6 logs left, Evelyn protested. We're so close. Not worth dying for. But before they could pack up, the snow began. Not the gentle flurries of early winter, but a sudden whiteout that reduced visibility to a few feet. And in that moment, disaster struck. Bronze, pulling a log near the steepest section, hit a patch of snow-covered ice. Her back hooves slipped, and for a heart-stopping second, it looked like the massive mare would slide down the hillside, potentially taking the log and Mara with her. What happened next would be burned into Evelyn's memory forever. Blackwood, standing 20 feet away with his own log secured, immediately began moving toward Bronze without any command. He positioned himself diagonally below the mare, bracing his massive body against the slope, creating a living anchor. "Evelyn, release his log!" Mara screamed. "Now!" Evelyn's hands moved on instinct, unhitching Blackwood's drag. Free of his load, the big gelding dug his hooves deeper into the hillside, his entire body trembling with effort as Bronze used him to regain her footing. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, the 2 horses held their positions on that icy slope. Then Bronze found solid ground, and both horses stood still, their sides heaving, their breath creating clouds in the freezing air. "Oh my word," Evelyn whispered, her hands shaking as she moved to Blackwood's head. "Oh my word, you incredible, brilliant horse." Blackwood nickered softly, as if to say it was all in a day's work. They abandoned the last 6 logs and made it off the mountain just as the road became impassable. The drive back to Skyview Ranch was silent, all 3 humans processing how close they'd come to disaster and how a 17-year-old gelding had saved them all. 2 days later, Mitch Crawford arrived at the ranch to inspect their work. The weather had cleared, allowing him to access the site with his evaluation team. Evelyn waited at the ranch, too nervous to eat, while Mara fed the horses and Otis pretended to repair equipment. When Crawford's truck finally appeared, Evelyn's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He stepped out slowly, his expression unreadable. Then, suddenly he was smiling. "That," he said, "is the finest piece of selective logging I've seen in 20 years. You're environmentally clean, ahead of schedule, considering the weather delay, and the quality is exceptional. The watershed is untouched, the remaining trees are undamaged. It's textbook work." Evelyn felt her knees go weak with relief. "There's only one problem," Crawford continued, and her heart sank. "I've got 12 more contracts like this one, and they're all going to want the team that did this job. How do you feel about expanding?" Evelyn looked at Mara, who was grinning, at Otis, who had tears in his eyes, and at Blackwood, who was peacefully grazing in the pasture, the morning sun making his gray coat shine like polished steel. "I think," Evelyn said slowly, "we're going to need more horses." 6 months later, Skyview Ranch was unrecognizable. The barn had been rebuilt. New fences lined pastures where 4 draft horses now grazed. Blackwood and Bronze had been joined by 2 younger Percherons that Mara was training. The equipment shed held properly maintained logging gear, and the ranch house had a fresh coat of paint. But more than the physical changes, the ranch was alive again with purpose. Evelyn stood in the barn early one morning, braiding Blackwood's mane for a logging demonstration they were giving to a group of forestry students. The big gray gelding stood patiently, his eyes half closed in contentment. "You know," Evelyn said softly, "when Uncle Otis found your ad online, everyone thought he was crazy. A 17-year-old horse that hadn't worked in 3 years. It seemed like throwing money away." Blackwood's ears swiveled back to catch her voice. "But you weren't finished at all. You just needed someone to believe in you, someone to give you a chance to show what you could still do." She paused, her throat tight. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. You know that, right?" The big Percheron turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers with that profound intelligence that still took her breath away. Then he gently bumped his nose against her shoulder, his way of saying he understood. "Evelyn," Mara called from outside, "the students are here, and you're not going to believe this, but Crawford just called with a contract in Wyoming. Huge project, multi-year deal." Evelyn gave Blackwood one final pat and led him out into the Colorado sunshine. The big gray Percheron walked beside her, with his head high, his stride confident, every inch the working horse he'd always been meant to be. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sam. "Saw the article about your company in the Forestry Journal. I was wrong. You weren't running away. You were running towards something real. Proud of you, sis." Evelyn blinked back tears as she read it, then looked up at Blackwood, who was waiting patiently to demonstrate his skills to the next generation of foresters. They'd both been written off by a world that only valued youth and novelty, but together they'd proven that experience, heart, and determination could overcome any obstacle. Skyview Ranch was saved, and it had been saved the old way, the right way, with draft horses, hard work, and the unbreakable bond between humans and the magnificent animals who'd built this country one log at a time. As Blackwood waited patiently for the demonstration to begin, Evelyn made a silent promise. She would spend the rest of his working life making sure he knew how valued he was, how appreciated, how absolutely essential. Because sometimes the best investments aren't the young, flashy ones everyone wants. Sometimes they're the grizzled veterans that everyone else overlooks, the ones with experience, wisdom, and heart to spare. And Blackwood had plenty of all three. The corporate refugee and the depressed draft horse had both found their purpose again, proving that it's never too late for a second chance. Not for horses, and not for humans either. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see past age and past failures to the strength that still remains. And sometimes saving something else is exactly how we save ourselves.